Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, everyone present, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing the time for us today. So before we start off with the session, I would like to give a small introduction. And RGQuest is glad to resume the Alumni Connect Series. And joining us today is Shalini Sitaraman Menezes. She's our alumnus from the very first batch of RG. And Shalini ma'am is currently the founder and director of Patented.Network at IP Crafters Advisory after her fair share of individual practice and also as a volunteer consultant, having worked with individual investors. She is also pursuing her doctorate from Goa University on evaluation of intangibles as a continuation of her master's project, and today she's going to interact with us on the topic basics of IP valuation and monetization. So I'd request all of your attention as the floor is all hers now. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Ma'am, you are on mute, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you, Matthews, for inviting me to your Alumni Connect series. And I am excited to be talking to the students of RGSOIPL. And I was the very first batch, and I think a lot of I feel I have very good memories of RGSOIPL, and so it's an honor for me to give back to the students. So, without further ado, I'm going to switch off my camera for bandwidth issues, and towards the end, when we have, if we have Q&A at the end, uh, I'll switch it on again at that time.
Okay.
Okay. So we have, we are studying intellectual property, and we are studying the basics of IPR, and we see that. So my experience has been that we talk about patents, we talk about trademarks, copyrights, but what we fail to talk about is where do we go after IP, once the IP is granted, once the IP is registered. And so the need of the hour is monetization, is commercialization. So this patented network stems from the fact that once from my individual practice, once we started getting patents granted, my clients started coming back to me and saying, ma'am, where do we go after this? Who's going to buy it? We don't have the money to set up the factory, to set up the plant and machinery. So what do we do? So I started looking around, and there are a few platforms abroad, but and I think there are CSIR also lists their patents, and NRDC also lists patents, but there is no one who is doing it on a regular basis, no one who's providing valuation which is tailored towards intellectual property. And as we go through the basics of IP valuation and monetization today, you will see that why there has to be a specific valuation mechanism for intellectual property. So let's start. Today's agenda is going to be different types of assets and value of the same, main valuation methods, and the summary. In that summary, we will also talk about monetization. So tell me, we have all been through patent lectures, intellectual property basics lectures, and I don't need to tell you that innovation is everywhere. Adam Smith had talked about wealth of nations, and I propose to you that the new wealth of nations is data, right? Because 90% of the world's data, that is 1 exabyte of data, 90% of 1 exabyte has been generated in the last 2 years.
Ma'am,
And yeah,
ma'am, are you sharing the PPT, ma'am? Like,
e- PPT doesn't work on Google for me, Google Meet, so
okay.
I'm sharing my PDF. Are you able
Ma
to see it?
no, ma'am, we just see the folder, not the PDF.
Okay, let me just
Okay.
check. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So 90% of the world's data, that is zero point 0.9 exabyte of data, has been generated in the last 2 years. And what do I mean when I say data? I mean your PowerPoints that you create, your Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, WhatsApp forwards, everything is included in data. Your selfies that you post, TikTok videos, etc., etc. 65% of today's teenagers are going to hold jobs that don't yet exist. From the time when I was a teenager to where I am now, most of the jobs that exist today did not exist then, like social media marketers or chief meme officers. These jobs did not exist at that time. They did not exist 5 years ago, let alone today. We know, if you've been following patent application data, we know that in the last 2 years, up until 2 years ago, US used to have the number one spot, but now in the last 2 years, China has taken over that number one spot. And every 2 days, we create as much information as we did from the dawn of man through 2003. Right, dawn of man, as in I'm talking from from the Big Bang, uh, and formation of universe till today, till 2003. That much information we are creating every 2 days. So clearly, once we have so much data, we have to talk about how to protect it, right? Because that data belongs to someone. That data is someone's property. So let's talk about how this data adds value to the company. So every company consists of tangible and intangible assets, right? we have um, we have tangible assets, which is your building land, vehicles, equipment, plant and machinery, and so on. And you have intangible assets, which are divided again into two parts, where we have goodwill, and we have intangible assets one, which is in yellow, which is patents, trademarks, copyrights, designs, human capital, and so on. If this is not enough, I'm going to present to you this graph, which tells you, this is from a study conducted by Ocean Tomo in 2017, which shows you how the gold shaded bit is the intangible bit, and how it has been increasing over from 1975 to 2015. So when I talk about intangible assets, right, gray and the dark gray and the yellow part. When I'm talking about intangible assets, I am talking about all these assets. I am talking about marketing related intangible assets. I am talking about contract related intangible assets. I am talking about um, artistic related intangible assets, which is your copyrights and um, books and photographs and so on. I'm talking about customer related intangible assets, which is your customer list, your vendor list, etc. And I'm talking about technology related intangible assets, which consists of your patents and innovations. So now let's look at tangible and intangible assets, right? I have in gray, I have the dark gray is your goodwill, yellow is your other intangible assets, which is your IP, which is what we're here to talk about. And as you see that we have we have for various industries, I have a breakdown. Now before I go on to the next one, can you tell me where I have which industries, right? I have highest IP, the yellow shaded part is in 49% and 47%. I want you to stop and take a guess as to which these industries might be. So give it a shot. You can unmute yourself and answer.
uh,
Pharma, okay. And what would the other be?
AI industries,
Which one?
AI, artificial
AI.
intelligence.
Okay. Okay. So let's look at that. It's pharma. You were right about the pharma. And the second one is biotech, right? So we have maximum IP in pharma and biotech. And if I look at M&A transactions, the one that is the highest is patents, right? So clearly, I think I have highlighted enough that patents are important, and the patents are the one IP asset that have the most impact on any of your business transactions, especially if you belong to biotech or pharma industries. So then this brings me to the question, how do I assign a value? How do I, if IP asset, patents are the most important assets in M&A transaction, how do I attach a price tag to it? Now, when you go to the shop and you are buying something, there is a price tag on it, right? So when the price tag is there on it, you have to gauge, okay, is this of value to me, is this not of value to me? How do I go about ascertaining that value? So there are two things. You notice in the last sentence, I have talked about two concepts. I've talked about value and I've talked about price. Price is what you have to pay. Value is how important that thing is to you. Why do I have two terms for the same thing? Because one is how important something is to you, and the second thing is how much money you're willing to part with. So the two may be the same or they may not be the same, right? And there may be a mismatch, value price mismatch, and I'll show it to you in a graph. So price is the result from a transaction, and value is how much people are ready to pay. So there is certain amount of cognition, there is a certain amount of emotion, certain amount of sentiment that is attached to it, and so all these things come into play when we are talking about value. But nothing of that sort comes into play when you're talking about price. When it's price, it's just that there is a price tag. It is 50 rupees or 5,000 rupees, and you have to pay it no matter what. Right. So we have owner value, because the owner who is parting with it, he has to determine how much he values the item. If you are the purchaser, you have to decide how much you value that item. And finally, market value, which is what is the price of similar items already sold. Now, I'm going to lead you through a couple of examples where we see how value would change depending on how much sentiment we attach to something. So Professor Ashwath Damodaran is from New York Stern University, and he is called the Dean of Valuation. Of course, he does business valuation and he does not get into patent valuation or IP valuation, but this image that he talks about brings into highlights how there is a gap between the value and the price. The gap may be a positive gap or it may be a negative gap. So when I'm talking about value, I have to talk about what are the cash flows associated with it, what are the growth prospects, what is the risk I am taking in parting with this money or in parting with this object. When I'm talking about price, then I'm talking of what is the momentum. Whose momentum? The market in that relevant technology. What is the mood of the market? What is everybody around me? What are the industry experts thinking? How liquid is this asset? Then I attach a price to it. So the price, if I have to give you a succinct definition, I will say price is the amount of money that is exchanged for a commodity, and value is what value you attach to it or what value somebody else attaches to it. It could be the owner or the buyer. Okay, so now I have this glass of water. How much do you think this glass of water would you pay for this glass of water? How much? You can unmute yourself and tell me how much you would pay for this glass of water.
Ma'am, it depends upon how much we require that water now.
Okay, so let's say you are in a restaurant. Then how much would you pay for that glass of water?
10 rupees, ma'am.
10 rupees. Okay. There's no right or wrong answer. So please answer whatever you think. Okay. 10 rupees. Then if I ask you, you have been walking for 2 kilometers. Now tell me how much would you pay for the glass of water?
I think anything that is asked for at that moment.
Anything that is asked for that round. Okay. Now I'm going to change it a little more. You are stuck in the desert for 2 days and now somebody offers you a glass of water. How much would you pay for it?
Ma'am, I think it depends on the quality of water as well.
No, you were
Right.
stuck in the desert for
Anything.
2 days, my child.
Anything, ma'am. Anything that's asked for.
Right. They ask for your expensive watch, they ask for your shoes, you are going to give it to them within reason because that value has increased. That value has gone from so if you are sitting in a restaurant, you have gone from home to a restaurant and you're with friends and you have a water bottle with you will not pay anything. If you don't have a water bottle, you will pay 10 rupees or you will expect it to be given for free because you're in a restaurant. But as your situation becomes more dire, that glass of water becomes very valuable to you. Now think of it from the seller's perspective. Seller has only one bottle of water remaining, and you have been running for 5 kilometers and there is no water available, and you ask him for one glass or 250 ml of his 1 liter, then he has to part with something that is valuable to him, correct? So he is going to attach a price depending on how much he thinks he's going to need that remaining 750 ml. So so this whole exercise is to tell you that value is not an objective thing, right? If I have a portrait, if I have Starry Nights by Vincent van Gogh, as the owner of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Nights, I am going to attach a value to it. That, okay, this painting is the most expensive painting in the world, it costs $2 billion. But if I am bankrupt and all I own is a painting, then I'm going to want $5 billion because it is the only object of value that is remaining with me and I need the money to survive the next day. So value is going to change. Now, okay, all you cricket enthusiasts, tell me, what is the value of this? How much would you pay for this cricket bat?
500.
How much? I don't know how much a cricket bat costs. ₹500. Okay. Uh, Anyone who wants to pay more or less?
I'm 5,000.
5,000. Okay. Can I tell you that someone paid 1,56,000 for this cricket bat? Will you believe me?
Yes, ma'am.
Huh?
Yes, ma'am.
You will believe? Okay. Why would someone pay 1,56,000 for this cricket bat?
Ma'am, if it has a signature of Rahul Dravid, I would definitely pay.
You would pay one lakh
Ma'am,
fifty
it
six
may,
thousand.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So y'all are a far more evolved crowd than I am. So this cricket bat was sold for 1,56,000 because Amir Khan played with it and used it in Lagan. So you are right. So its value increases because you are a Rahul Dravid fan or you are an Amir Khan fan. So if you see a plank of wood which was used as a very rudimentary cricket bat, but Amir Khan held it, or you a 500 rupees, 600 rupees cricket bat which has Rahul Dravid's signature on it, then you would pay 1,56,000. So you see the difference between price and value. Okay. Now, as I said, sometimes price and value can be the same. Often it is not, because the intrinsic value is going to be on an upward trend. Okay. And if you're talking about a patent, it will go up and then it will go back down, because as you get closer to the end of 20 years, the value is going to go down because now there is competing technology. But let's say we are only talking about the first 15 years of a patent. So you see slowly the value is going up. The market price is fluctuating all over the place. Why does the market price fluctuate all over the place? Because it is taking into account the mood of the market. Sometimes pharmaceutical products are in high demand because of COVID or some other pandemic. Sometimes everybody is in good health, everyone has started running and cycling and swimming and so on, and so the requirement for drugs goes down, pharmaceutical products goes down. Sometimes everyone is investing in Tesla, so EV stock prices go up, market prices go up. Elon Musk uh, puts out some crazy tweet and everyone is annoyed with him, so Tesla stock prices drop, EV stock prices drop, and therefore your market price goes down. So you see that market price can be underpriced or overpriced. Of Sometimes, but not always, it is the same as the value. But often the value is lower or higher than what the market price is. But you deal with it anyway because it's a commodity. If your market price is higher, then it's not a seller's market. It is a seller's market. If it's underpriced, it is a buyer's market, right? So that's all it is. That's what in share language we talk about being bullish or bearish. So why do we need to value intellectual property? Why this whole spiel about IP? And we've already talked about the importance of IP, right? We've already talked about how in mergers and acquisitions, how when we are valuing a company's worth, we talk about IP as a separate section. So valuing IP is important. But there are other requirements why we would require to value IP, such as when you're trying to license out your IP for internal management, for you to know what are your KPIs, to know your milestones, to if you want to buy or sell a company, if you want to do have a dispute resolution, either litigation or alternate dispute resolution, to plan for your taxation, audits, for raising finance, to attract venture capitalists. For all of these, there are different stakeholders. And depending on which side of the bench, which side of the table you are, your method of valuing IP will be different. Your requirements for valuing IP will be different. So again, I am going to drive home the point that it is a very subjective beast. It is not one of your exact sciences that you're all technically qualified. So it is not one of your engineering or pure science physics equation, or a biotech process, bio process, which says in photosynthesis it has to have carbon dioxide and sunlight and so on and so forth. This thing is something that can morph depending on the requirements and depending on the parties in question. So now let's talk about the main valuation methods. Okay. There are three main valuation methods, but before I talk about the three main valuation methods, I'm going to talk about the distinction, the classification. I can have a qualitative valuation method, or I can have a quantitative. In qualitative, I am looking at the quality of things. I am therefore going to assign a score, a grade, A, B, C, D, or F if it's fail. In quantitative, I'm going to attach a monetary value. I'm going to say this is priced at so and so. The value of this is these many rupees or these many dollars. So depending on whether I choose qualitative or quantitative, my end valuation result will differ. There are some people who do a qualitative. I myself prefer quantitative because I like to see, I have a physics background. And now I'm dealing with finance. So I like to see numbers. And I also feel that there is a certain authenticity to numbers. Having said that, it does not mean that anyone who's doing qualitative is incorrect. I just feel that explaining qualitative for me is harder. So qualitative will give you a score on a scale. It will say, either it will say on a scale of 1 to 5 that, very poor, poor, okay, mediocre, good, very good. Or it'll say A is excellent, B is, A plus A, B plus B, that kind of thing. So qualitative method gives you an insight into the strength, coverage, usability of the right. So again, I'm going to reiterate that it is not a bad method. It is just that it can be used for certain situations only. It cannot be used for situations where I want to sell a patent or I want to license a patent, because in those conditions, I need a number. But there are certain other situations where I may not need a number. I just need to know, is it strong or is it weak? In which case, qualitative is perfect. So there used to be a software called Prism software, which is not available anymore. And I haven't been able to find any other reference to this except in one research paper that I was studying. And Prism breaks down your patent valuation into 4 buckets. One is it can be used for joint ventures between 2 companies. It can be used as a defensive patent. It can be used as to assert monopoly, or it can be used for license. So, in the event that a patent is being valued for license or monopoly, it has a higher value or a higher ranking. If it is used for joint venture or for defensive purposes, it has a low value or low ranking. Beyond this, I don't have any more information on Prism. But I think that Prism does not give you even a grade. It just tells you whether it is low value or high value depending on your purpose. Now, you cannot use the same ranking if you change your purpose. Let's say I want to license out my patent as well as I want to use it as a defensive patent to shield my technology from other companies, from my competitors. That is what I mean by defensive. Right? I'm trying to defend my company or my technology, my area of technology. In that case, where am I going to land? Somewhere in between, because I cannot claim the high value of license, I cannot claim the low value of defensive. So Prism gets shaky, and then you have to redo the whole exercise. But if it is for a solo purpose only and it falls into any of these, it can give you a decent grade. So why pick qualitative? Sometimes you just want to know whether it is strong or weak, because you want to decide whether you want to keep it, you want to maintain, pay the maintenance fees and maintain it for 20 years, or you want to just sell it, you want to abandon it. So all those options are there, and therefore for that, for a broad overview, for a macro level decision, qualitative is perfect. But I am going to spend the next bulk of next half an hour talking about the quantitative methods. So there are three main quantitative methods: market, income, and cost. But I'm going to go in the opposite direction and say cost, market, and income. So let's delve a little deeper into cost, market, and income. Whenever you open any book on valuation, there aren't any books on patent valuation, but any research paper or any journal article, they are going to talk about these three methods. So the cost method is something that looks to the past, that says, okay, what was the history of this? Then based on that, it will give you an amount. The market says, I'm going to look all around me. I'm going to look at the market. I'm going to look up, down, sideways, what is immediately around me. And income based looks to the future. So it says, what am I going to expect in the future? So let's start with cost method. Cost says, like I said, it talks about the history. So it says, what did it cost me to develop this technology? How much did it cost me to develop this technology? Okay, so if it cost me 5,000, I will say that the price of the asset is 5,000. Let's say you build a paper airplane. Okay, and the paper was torn from a notebook. The notebook cost 80 rupees and it had 80 pages, so each page is 1 rupee. And you painted it with different colors, so let's say 5 rupees for the colors. And we are at 6 rupees. And then your own time that you spend, the 5 minutes that you spend, let's say you charge 100 rupees. So now you have said that your paper airplane is at 106 rupees. That is the cost that went into developing that asset, into developing that paper airplane. So when I ask you, will you sell me that airplane? You will say, yes, ma'am, but I'm going to charge you 106 rupees for it. I ask you why? What is this ad hoc number of 106 rupees? And you tell me, then you give me this breakdown. It costs me 1 rupee for the paper, 5 rupees for the paint, and 100 rupees for how I have perfected making that airplane. Fair enough. So that was your R&D that has gone from, you've been practicing making paper airplanes since you were in fourth standard, so that many years. You have trials. Your first airplane was very bad, it was terrible. Then you tested and you learned from your friends, and then you learned how to make the proper airplane. Then you realize that, hey, if I can paint it, then that's your marketing and advertising. Cost of capital goes into it. You have picked up how to make that paper airplane more alluring, more attractive to buyers. And that is how you price your asset, based on cost methods. So how much was, what is the problem with this? You told me 106 rupees was spent to develop that technology of making that paper airplane. Now, what is the problem with this? Can you Whoever wants to answer, you can unmute yourself and answer. Do you see the problem with this kind of pricing or valuation?
What I think is like the cost won't reflect the value properly. Like even if it involved a very low cost to invent
Mm,
the stuff, the
mm.
output that we get or the value that we get will be much higher than the cost of making it.
Okay, okay. So let's see. So like you said, R&D costs, they are difficult to take into account. Inflation is not taken into account. It will not adequately reflected because your paper airplane, you have been building paper airplanes. You may say that this particular airplane of painting the wings and making it perfect like this, where I can sell it to people, that is for the last 1 year. But you have been making airplanes, you have been playing with paper and making different craft items since you were in first standard, right? So from the age of 6 to the age of 26, 20 years you have spent in developing this in. So, am I going to take the 20 years of expertise? Am I going to take the last 1 year where this final product was made? Am I going to take into account the failures?
Madam, this is Samrat here, second year LLB student.
Sure.
Well, I understand that there could be number of implications. For example, when we're talking about valuation, we understand that there's time valuation of money also. And
Yes.
there is an IRR and also the ROI, which is the capital returns, basically. That is, valued across the different, years as you're rolling by. So there
Right.
could be inflationary pressures, and how do you subsume that actually? I mean, because sometimes there are inherent risks, like for example, credit risk, in liquidity risk, or market risk, business risk, liquidity risk. So how do you subsume this one in your valuation, ma'am?
Okay. So that will not come into cost method. I'm coming to that in the next few methods. So it's
I
good
see.
points. All of them are good points. And that is the reason, because you have raised these points, cost method is inadequate to explain all of what you have raised. I cannot answer any of your questions based on cost method.
True. Thank
Okay.
you.
Right. So it does not, like Samrat said, it does not take into account inflation. It does not take into account any of the your risk, your time value of money, and that is why, even though the cost method is useful for a very very limited purpose, by and large for valuation, if I have to give someone a valuation for transacting that intellectual property, cost method is inadequate, hugely inadequate, right? Because okay, so the other way I can ascertain cost method, the valuation using cost method, is how much would it cost me to recreate a similar technology. So let's say a robot that cleans, that sweeps and mops the floor exists, but how much would it cost me to recreate that? Would then I would say, okay, that much is what it costs. How much would it cost me to recreate that paper plane? I would say 106 rupees, and then I say, okay, that is the cost method of it, value of it. But this is advantageous to the buyer because it includes replication costs. It does not mean that I have to start from scratch, which means it absorbs the cost of failure and so on. But advantages for the buyer, again, it minimizes risk because something like this already exists. The problem is that I have a delayed market entry because I have to wait for someone to create this and then I have to copy it. So when do I use the cost approach? It is when your IP is easy to design around, when I just need it for bookkeeping or accounting purposes, when I just need a back of the napkin, very rough calculation or a starting point, like boundaries for my valuation, then I say that, okay, the starting point should be this. And I can do a cost based method. Or when I don't have it in the market yet, it's at a very early stage of development. But like it was pointed out by Samrat, cost based method is it falls short of answering a lot of questions. So I'm going to look around me and look at market based methods. So market based is, you can think of it as past, present and future. So the past did not help us very much. It gave us a starting point. Now I'm going to look at the present. what is the value? I'm going to assign a value based on similar transactions. That what similar IPRs have sold for, I want to buy, I want to buy it for that much or lesser than that or in that bracket, because I know that recently there was Dr. Reddy's laboratory sold four products, pharmaceutical products, for 98 crores to another company. Now, if I want to sell a pharmaceutical product, I know that they have sold it for 98 crores for four products. So I divide 98 by 400 by 4, 25 crores per product. So I say, okay, I know I can get ballpark 25 crores for a product. I'll hike it a little more because they sold four, so they must have the buyer must have bargained a little bit. But let's say I say 35. Fine. So I know based on market what is happening for a similar product, how much people are paying. This is called as there's a fair value of the patent. When can I use market approach? If there is enough transaction happening for that kind of IPR, if I can compare pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical, yes, then I can say 25 or 35 CR. But I cannot compare apples and oranges. I cannot compare AI based technology with pharmaceutical and say that they sold four products for 100 CR. Can I not sell four AI based technologies for 100 CR? No, because there is no way I can compare the two in a fair manner. Also, the stage of development, they had ready products, mine is in the infant stages, or mine is a ready product and they sold just a rough prototype. Then we have to talk about what were the financial terms, legal parameters. As you know that a lot of these transactions happen behind closed doors, so those terms are not made public. If they're not made public, it is very hard for me to gauge whether I can use that same transaction information, whatever limited thing is available in public, and extrapolate it to my product or my IP. So, market based approach works when there is enough transaction information in public domain and it is for similar technology at a similar stage of development. Okay. Where will you find transaction data? Generally, newspaper articles, security filings, company websites, industry presentations, annual reports, but then you have to wait that long for the annual report. Licensing Economic Review is a royalty rate journal which gives you an insight into what the royalty rates are. Court records, if it is an M&A and it has been recorded. Licensing specialists, if you know someone, they will tell you, give you a heads up. So there are various ways to find transaction data, but again, how accurate something is and how honest someone has been in disclosing that data, you have to take it with a grain of salt. So present would work, but only under very strict conditions, market-based methods. So now I look at future, income-based. How much money am I going to generate in the future? And I have to assign a risk factor to it. I have to assign a rate of interest, and then I can figure out how much does it cost right now. So your value of your IPR is its ability of the technology to generate future income, right? So what is the value of your IPR degree? What is the value of your LLB from IIT Kharagpur? Yes, right now it costs X lakhs, but it is actually you have registered for the course because it is the ability of that degree to generate your future income, right? So the present value of the expected future income is what is the value of your course today. And I can assign that definition to patents.
Madam, do you also subsume sinking cost also over here? Because sometimes what happens is that suppose if I invested money, but it is totally ruined because somebody has given me fail in the last semester, so I fail the whole exam. So the point is that do you give also subsume that also in your valuation also? Suppose the IP does not click at the last moment, or
So it depends on at what stage are you valuing your IP, and for what reason are you valuing your IP. So in today's session, I'm not including any of those things. Today's session is just a basics. But when I actually do an IPR thing, it is whether the patent is published or whether the patent is granted, whether I have a working prototype, whether I have beyond the working prototype, do I have the required certifications and approvals from the regulatory authorities. It depends on at what level it is. So based on that, certain parameters will be included, certain parameters will not be included. For my PhD thesis, I have isolated 80 parameters, but obviously I cannot use all 80 at the same time. It'll make it very clunky and it'll make the valuation extremely unattractive. So based on where I am in my process, I'm going to pick and choose what I want to use. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, perfect.
So this method is income based method, which we are looking at the future, is called discounted cash flow. It is a very popular method. Again, discounted cash flow I'm going to is used in business valuation, but we can also use in patent valuation. But I'm going to give you a disclaimer here. If you don't have if you haven't sold your patented product or process, and it is still in the published phase, and you don't have any kind of revenue or investment in plant and machinery, and you are going to be guessing all that, if all of that is assumption based, then your value is going to be a, a fictitious value. It is assumed. I cannot put any money behind that. I cannot say that I support this valuation. It is going to be something that is pulled out of thin air because I'm making so many assumptions. But if I have revenue, if I have generated revenue, if I have paid my employees, if I have invested in raw materials, and I have an inventory and plant and machinery and so on, then my valuation is going to be closer to the expected value, closer to the real value. So there is always this disclaimer given in when you're using discounted cash flow. So how do all these how all your Swiggy and Uber and Ola, how all of these are valued? It is based on DCF. If you look at Professor Ashwath Damodaran's blog, which I suggest you do start looking as a precursor to valuation, it's called Market Musings or Musings on Markets or something like that. Just Google Ashwath Damodaran. So he uses discounted cash flow in every single business valuation.
But ma'am, the assumptions are there that the accretion will not be there, right? I mean, the discounted cash flows is always a diminishing rate of return over the years.
Yes, of course. At some point, it is going to plateau out.
Generally, ma'am, there can be actually some kind of products which actually जितना मतलब रखेंगे आप लोग उसको और भी निखार मिलेगा. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल ये भी देखी जाती है कि पेटेंटों का कि बहुत सारे लोग बहुत टाइम पे वे यूज कर चुके हैं, 5 साल 6 साल यूज कर चुके हैं, उसके बाद उनकी गुणवत्ता को और निखारा जाता है. तो कहीं ना कहीं मैम वो सब सब्स्यूम नहीं करते हैं क्या आप लोग इसमें वैल्यूएशन में?
If you're talking about a patent, 5-6 साल में निखार आता है, but the thing is 20 साल में उसकी लाइफ खत्म हो जाती है ना.
पर लास्ट के 15 साल में तो हम और लेवरेज ले सकते हैं ना, तो तब तक मार्केटिंग स्ट्रेटजी तैयार हो जाता है और कस्टमर्स रिपीट कस्टमर्स भी हमारे पास आ सकते हैं.
मैं आपको 10 इयर्स दूंगी, बाकी लास्ट 5 मैं आपको 20 साल में से अगर आपको 5 साल टेक्नोलॉजी. Does everyone here follow Hindi?
Ma'am, it's better to keep
I'm sorry, I'll switch to English. So what he's saying is that if you have used a technology for 5-6 years, then it shows that your technology is actually worthy and valuable, and therefore therefore the remaining 15 years are more profitable. But I beg to differ on this, because for a patent, typically the last 4-5 years, I'm excluding pharmaceutical from this discussion, okay? Excluding pharmaceutical, when I'm talking about AI or software or any of these rapidly evolving fields, the last 5-6 years there are going to be competing technologies. So the value that you are going to get from your patent is going to plateau out. It's going to fall and it is going to plateau. For pharmaceutical, it's a whole different ball game, because pharmaceutical 10 years 12 years go into clinical trials and animal trials, human trials, clinical trials, regulatory licenses and so on. So by the time it's 12 years or 15 years, you, even though you have a patent for that, you haven't been able to bring your product out to the market. So in that case, the last 5 years are going to be very profitable. But in other cases, where I'm talking about CRI and biotech, anywhere where technology is involved, the last 5 6 years will be worthless, because you know how quickly things evolve in that field.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am,
Right.
can we keep the Q&A session at the end so that we can finish the
Okay.
presentation?
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. Q&A will be at the end. Just put in your questions in the chat in the meantime if you think you're going to forget them, and then we'll answer them at the end.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So DCF is your compound interest formula. There is nothing fancy about it. Okay. All it does is you find out how many years you want to talk about. You have a risk adjusted discount rate, which takes into account what Samrat was talking about, and what is and once you use your compound interest formula, it tells you what is the present value of the IP asset. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. 100 rupees. Do you want 100 rupees now, or do you want 100 rupees in a year?
Now it's a
Now. Everyone wants it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Why do you want it now?
कल को कौन देखा है मैम? Who knows the tomorrow?
Who knows
The
tomorrow?
value of it remains.
Value of it may change, right? With
Also, ma'am,
inflation.
if we have it now, we might be able to multiply that amount in some time.
Correct. So, and also there is a risk that I may rescind the offer. There is a risk that I will take away all the 100 rupee notes, and there will be nothing left for you all next year, right? So I have time and I have risk. Now, second question: 100 rupees cash or lottery ticket that may give you a chance to win 100 rupees? 100 rupees. Okay. So DCF has two principles. We do it because there is time and because of risk. And the three parameters that you're looking at is the amount of income, the duration of income, so that is your time, and the risk associated with that realization of that income. Right? So I have to see for how much time, and I have to see the risk associated with it, and then I back calculate and bring it back saying that 100 rupees is right now the value of 100 rupees is, without the risk and without the 1 year extension, it is whatever 82 rupees or 88 rupees or whatever I want to call it. So that is your DCF. But in addition to DCF, there are softwares. So DCF again, so cost method, income method, DCF method, they are good for assigning boundaries to the numbers. You may not arrive at the definite value, but it will give you a sort of ballpark figure saying lower end is this and higher upper end is this, or median is this. But there are uh, softwares. Now the IP score was a software that was uh, given by the European Patent Office. I don't think they have it anymore, or if they do, they do not update it, and it is not the current version anymore. But nevertheless, it's a good starting point to go and see how they give you a value. They give you a score. So it's qualitative, and they give you a score. And they also give you a pictorial diagnosis. They also give you a net present value based on DCF. So it is a little bit of everything. Now, IP score has, so if you go through IP score, it asks you questions based on the legal status, whether it is granted or it is published. So again, it is A through E or 1 through 5 or something like that. What is the how well are you monitoring the patent? If there is someone who is going to infringe, what is your monetary situation? Are you going to be able to file litigation and so on? What are the market conditions? What technology is it in? Is it a rapidly evolving technology? Are substitute products easily available? Does licensing and regulatory affairs take a lot of time? What is the financial situation of the applicant? What is the strategy you are using? Is it an offensive patent? Is it a defensive patent? Is it for joint venture? Is it for licensing, and so on? So there are about 8 questions in each section. And at the end of each section, based on your answer, you are assigned a score. When you are assigned a score, it gives you a you can choose your pictorial representation also. So it also tells you that you have technology, market, finance, legal issues. And what do? You have to get all this. You cannot just fill out this. You cannot just fill out this entire software, go through it by yourself. You are the senior manager. You will get your peers or your colleagues in various departments, from the technology guy, from the marketing guy, from the legal guy, and from the finance guy. You will get them to fill out what is the status of each of these questions, what is the answer to each of this, and you will collate all those responses. Right? That is where the structured approach comes in. You cannot be one person sitting in one closed room answering those questions. When you have collected all that information, it will give you, and you have entered all that information into the IP score software, it will give you this kind of a spider web, a radar profile with legal status, and with, here there are multiple patents. A patent, the blue one is one and a pink one is two. So based on the legal status, technology, finance, and market conditions. Now I should also tell you that the Denmark Patent Office had made this software for EPO. If you go to the Denmark Patent Office site, there are more questions, but there are about 10 questions in the Denmark Patent Office website. You can just Google it, DKPTO patent valuation, and it leads you through 10 questions. So it'll give you an idea of what kind of questions they ask, what kind of parameters they use to give you a very rough valuation. Now, bear in mind that DKPTO and EPO both give you a qualitative answer. They don't give you a quantitative answer, because no one is going to put their money's worth and give you a valuation that has a number associated with it. It gives you, if you have a patent portfolio, it gives you a graph for the various patents, and it tells you opportunity versus risk. Again, like I said, everything is pictorial or qualitative, a grade, or a score. There is no money value attached to it. Okay, so the size of the bubble, the bigger the bubble, patent 1 seems to be the biggest. That means that is the highest profit. Patent 5 is the least profitable, right? And it is, and therefore you will see that patent 1 is also riskier. 1 and 6 are riskier than 5 and 3. Right. So this is the kind of graph. This is just a sample graph. So it will tell you all sorts of things that you need to know about the patent. But this is for your understanding. You have to convert this into a number and give it to someone. EPO's IP score used to also give a financial forecast. Why do I have two from 2018 to 2020? Why do I have it below the 0? Because that is the year where I have put in money without actually gaining anything, right? That's for my plant and
Wow.
machinery. Yes, I have my initial investment, and after my initial investment, then I'm going to spend 2 years in developing the technology, and then my profits grow. And again, after a few years, it tapers down. Without the patented technology, my profits are going to taper down. In the initial years, my patented technology is being developed. That is why it's in the negative. My profits are also in the negative, or it's a loss. So I'm going to go a little over time. You have to bear with me. It's not a topic that I could, it's difficult to consolidate it in 1 hour. So what are the various factors that we are looking at when we are talking about, regardless of what it is, whether it is IP score or DKPTO or a qualitative or quantitative? These are the questions you are looking at. You're looking at whether it's granted, whether it is valid, which countries, that also makes a difference. How much time is remaining for your patent, time to expiry, How many forward and backward citations? Can you detect infringement easily? Can you enforce your patent easily? How long was the prosecution period? And were there any oppositions anytime during prosecution or after prosecution? What is a technical position? What is the strength of claims? A patent in for a pharmaceutical product or for AI is going to be stronger than a patent for, let's say, an outfit, for an apparel based invention. Maturity. What are the options of designing around? What is my option of doing jugaad around that patent technology? How attractive it is. Sometimes you feel that I have a patent for something, paper planes, but is the market ready to buy paper planes? If the market has no requirement for paper planes, what are you going to do making having a patent for a method of making a paper plane? Right? So what is the industry size? What are your who are your competitors? What market do you have to acquire, to sell to? Right? So all that has to be taken into account. Sometimes your product may be your patented product or process may be ahead of its time and the market is not ready, so your valuation is extremely low. Sometimes it is after time and the market is mature and it is saturated, and again your patent value is low, but there is a sweet spot in between. So you have to study all of this while all of this is studied while the patent is being valued. How do I choose? Ma'am, you said qualitative, you said quantitative, you said cost, market, income. There are others, there are which I don't have time to cover today, called options, real options, Black Scholes models. Those are more mathematically rigorous and more elegant in their processing of variables. But the choice should be influenced by what kind of industry are you in, where are you in your patenting process, what is the maturity of the technology, how ready is the market, what information is available to you of comparable transactions, of comparable assets, if there is any, who are your competitors, what are they selling their product and process for. And it's a good idea to do several methods to get an envelope, to get a sort of a cover, so you're getting from the lowest to the highest and somewhere in between, and then you can nicely triangulate it to get a proper valuation. And it's not a one time thing. Valuation, whenever people value, right, it is for that day. If I say I have done a valuation today and I want to sell it 5 years later, or I want to monetize it 5 years later, it makes no sense, because so many things have changed. The technology has evolved differently, the industry has changed, the degree of risk has changed, the number of players in the market have changed, comparable assets have changed. So I cannot take a stale valuation and use it. I have to have a current valuation. Therefore, always do your valuation closer to when you want your transaction. And not every method of valuation is going to be applicable or suitable to every IP. So some of you may be trademark lawyers, some of you may be patent lawyers, some of you may be pharmaceutical patent lawyers. So you have to ask relevant questions. Today I'm only going to talk about questions for patents, but as and when you are valuing other intangibles, your questions that you ask will change. So you ask about competing technology, what are the rights that are available, what is the scope, what is the geographical coverage, uh, what are the jurisdictions that patent is applied in, what is the prosecution stage, what is the development stage, what are the financial benefits to people for using that patented product, and size of the market, lifespan of the patent, what are the hopes, what are the growth prospects for this particular technology. So you're going to ask, and these are only some of the questions, you're going to ask more questions as and when your expertise in the domain increases. So if you've seen a US patent, if you've read a patent during your class, you will see that there is so much information available on the first page of the patent itself. And I suggest that if you haven't paid close attention, you go back and you look at it. right from your IPC classification to the number of patent documents cited, to the number of foreign patent documents, the number of non scientific literature but non patent documents, the number of words in the claims, the number of claims that are found, the number of drawing sheets, the examiner's name, what is his prior um, record in disposing of patent hearings and so on. So you're going to glean all this information and use it in some form or the other. And what if you find something worthless? Let's say I found that a patent is worthless. I can use it as a troll. We know what trolls are, right? If you don't know, put a question in the chat and we'll talk about trolls or NPEs. We can use it as a decoy that, let's say I have a whole bunch of useless, worthless patents, or I have a whole bunch of useful patents, and I throw in a decoy worthless patent, and they look at that and say, okay, if everything is like this, we can bring down the costs, that we bring down the amount we are paying. So I use it as a decoy. I can use it as a bargaining chip. I can say that it is issued by a competent authority, and I can argue based on that just because it is you think it is worthless, but it is still, there is an intellectual property office of some country that has deemed it worthwhile and therefore has issued a patent. So I can argue several ways on when something is worthless, use it to my advantage, or actually change the narrative and say it is useful. Finally, you have to remember that the value of rights depends on who is looking at them. And therefore, the number that I get, valuation, is going to change according to the end user. So I have to assess the rights for valuation from the end user's perspective, not the seller's perspective. Sometimes you remember the little pie chart that we had of mergers and acquisitions and patents were 33%. The rights are valued in connection to other assets. So we are talking about, in mergers and acquisitions, we have to talk about patents, goodwill, plant and machinery, the office building, supplies, and so on. So we have to figure out whether we want to value the IPR separately or together with other parts of business. If I'm valuing it with other parts of the business, then a simple business valuation will work. But if I want to sell the IPR separately, then I have to do a separate IPR valuation, a patent valuation, and a trademark valuation. And all the tangible assets I will value separately. But, and this is the last slide, before you start anything, due diligence is a must. Before you start anything in law or anything in business, a due diligence is an absolute must. And IPR due diligence is used by investors before they invest in your company, before they invest in rights. But the investigation is also relevant in other cases. It gives you an idea of what is the scope of this technology, what is available to me in the future, what are the limitations or downsides of this particular IP, what could go wrong, or what are the potential growth prospects for this IP. So you have to do a due diligence, and a due diligence is going to differ based on what IP you are studying or what IP you are investigating. And therefore, this is a very general statement, but it's a good starting point. You can't go wrong if you start with due diligence, right? That brings me to the end of the session, and I'm going to take questions right now. I'm sorry it went a little over time, but uh, but I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and let me check for questions. NPE troll. Aman, did you want? Okay, so trolls. Anup was asking what is trolls. Trolls are non-practicing entities. They are not found in India. In the US, what they do is any kind of low performing patents or any patent that you think is weak, what they do is they accumulate a lot of patents. They buy a lot of patents from startups that are going out of business, or individuals that haven't managed to monetize their patents, and they collect a number of patents around a particular technology, such as, say, emailing. And then they will send cease and desist notice or they'll file suits against anyone and everyone who is using the technology or working in the technology, and say that you are infringing on our patent, you either pay us this much or we are going to file this suit against you. Typically there is no substance in their suit, and therefore the court is going to throw it out of the window anyway. But but there are some people who get scared and they don't talk to a patent attorney or a patent agent, and then they say that, we'll pay you whatever you want. So the patent trolls are people who collect patents, entities that collect patents without the intention of practicing or putting them into practice or commercializing or monetizing those. They are only using it to create a whole ticket where they can stop people from where they can go and tell people that stop using this because this is ours. So that's a troll. Any good textbook to read about IP valuation or valuation in general? Read Professor Damodaran's blogs, and read and he's got a lot of textbooks, but also most of the textbook material he puts out in his blogs. So you can just go and read his blogs. He puts all his lectures also online. It's for business valuation, but it's a good starting point to read Professor Damodaran's blog. Prospects for career in IP valuation, I'm still trying to figure that out. Ask me again in 2 years.
Okay, ma'am.
Reputation of company in valuating IP. The reputation of a company in valuing IP is that if I want to sell my patent, then I can bring in my reputation and say that, look, I already have a prior reputation where I have monetized so much. And therefore, if I am quoting a higher price for selling my patent or my IP, then I am justified in doing so. For example, let's say I don't have it trademarked, but let's say Shalini Menezes is trademarked, but I don't have the same uh, reputation as Godrej or Hindustan Lever, and therefore Hindustan Lever can attach a higher value to their valuation report, saying that because we have past successes. But if I'm trying to sell FMCG goods, nobody has heard of Shalini Menezes, or I don't have past experience in baking and selling FMCG, and therefore I cannot charge the same amount initially. But once my reputation grows, I will be able to command. I can build that into the valuation. I hope that answered your question, Kriti.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another part of the question was where does this like using reputation lies? Is it in the cost space? Like past, like you said, let's consider this as his past, present, or future. So where will it lie?
So I would not bring it into cost. For the simple reason is that in cost I still am unsure of whether I'm talking about the failures of the. Hello? No, my reputation would probably come into market and income. But again, it is something that will be added at the end. It will not be used in the calculation.
Madam,
Yeah,
can I ask a question, ma'am?
sure.
Ma'am, I'm comfortable in asking Hindi, so it's if you
Please
permit
ask.
me.
Yes, yes,
मैम
please.
कहीं ना कहीं ये हम लोग देखते हैं कि जब भी मर्जर्स एंड एक्विजिशंस की बात आती है तो जब हम लोग उन वैल्यूएशन की बातें करते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं गुडविल को हम लोग एक कंपोनेंट के रूप में यूज करते हैं मैम, और बैलेंस शीट में भी जब एबिटा हो जाता है, एबिटा और पैट, प्रॉफिट आफ्टर टैक्सेशन, एबिटा जब कैलकुलेशन करते हैं तो डिविडेंड की टैक्सेशन के रूप में डिविडेंड्स को जो टैक्सेशन होता है रिजर्व्स का, वो ऐड करके हम लोग प्रॉफिट बिफोर टैक्सेशन एंड आफ्टर टैक्सेशन का कंसिडरेशन करते हैं, और बैलेंस शीट में भी गुडविल का कंपोनेंट वहां पे दिखता है। तो कहीं ना कहीं जब ये मर्जर्स एंड एक्विजिशंस की बात होती है, जब बड़ी कंपनी आईपी कंपनी को दूसरे छोटी कंपनी को खा जाती है या उसको एमलगमेशन होता है या स्पिन ऑफ होता है, तो इस परिप्रेक्ष्य में आप इसको किस तरह से देखते हैं? दिस इज माय फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, एंड द सेकंड क्वेश्चन मैम इज पर्टेनिंग टू द ब्लैक-शोल्स मॉडल, बिकॉज 5 तत्वों को उसमें देखा जाता है, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल वॉलेटिलिटी, फिक्स्ड when striking out of the option price, and then coming up with a risk return model, and then accordingly subsuming that one. So in case of artificial intelligence and recent judgment, and also considering the Alice judgment which has come, where basically the risk assessment is a part of the valuation when it comes to actually valuing the AI based technologies, where South Africa and in fact, if I'm not wrong, Australia has also given one patent on AI technology. So in दो कहीं ना कहीं इसको आप इन आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के परिप्रेक्ष्य में आप इसको किस तरह से व्यू करते हैं, ये मेरी सेकंड क्वेश्चन है। इस दोनों के ऊपर अगर आप प्रकाश डालेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा।
मुझे इसके साथ आपको डिक्शनरी भी देना पड़ेगा ये क्वेश्चंस के साथ। आपकी हिंदी बहुत ही अच्छी है, बट आई एम स्टिल ट्राइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज योर क्वेश्चन।
One is that second question is the artificial intelligence, and it's how do you do risk assessment and valuation in that context. And the first question was more specifically with respect to this goodwill, like when you are doing mergers and acquisition, how the goodwill is being subsumed for valuation.
So when I'm doing patent valuation, then I'm only talking about the patent and the patented technology. Then the goodwill is taken care of in its trademark and its other things. So I'm not worried about that. When I'm doing a patent is patent, then I cannot use the same method of valuation for everything. It's not a one size fits all. So you are right in that. Goodwill इसमें नहीं आएगा, ठीक है? And for AI, unfortunately, I don't have AI expertise. So I'm not the right person to answer.
Not issue. I think you had given that window where we can actually, deliberate upon and also think on this parameters. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. But you can use, but to go back to your question on Black-Scholes, I think
Yes.
we'll have to study how AI evolves over the next couple of years. It's too new for me to gauge its volatility.
Because, ma'am, the reason why I asked, because generally when we do valuation, ma'am, there is another concept which is the CAPM, CAPM,
Yes.
capital asset pricing modeling.
Yes.
So this is being subsumed, actually internationally I'm talking about, standardized modeling. So this is being subsumed in the entire valuation. You go through any kind of IP-based firms, they actually take care of that one. But there are different portfolios, and different, portfolios are being actually seen from the prism of the CAPM modeling. So because risk modeling is also there. So,
but for your for your CAPM model, the problem is that your beta that you use is going to be you will have to do a technology related study for that. You cannot use a generic beta for that, and therefore even if you're using CAPM, you have to tailor it to the technology that you're using.
True. Great, wonderful, thanks.
Good questions. I don't know if you have a background in finance or you have experience in finance, but it shows in your questions. Okay. Actually, and it will help you with IP management.
I did my MBA and you saw me actually when I did my MBA, ma'am. I think you were going out because I remember you're from first batch.
I'm from the first batch.
And that was the time when I did my MBA actually.
Okay. You were in
Rajasthan?
Yeah. So you were in the 2006 to 8 batch or the 7 to 9 batch?
No, 6 to 8 batch.
6 to 8 batch, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Ma'am, I think there are no more questions in the chat box, so I think we can wrap up now.
Sure.
I invite Tashi to give a formal vote of thanks. Tashi is from third year.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Tashi Chaube, and it gives me a distinct pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for the first lecture of the season 2022 of RG Town Hall Guest Lecture Series. On behalf of RGQuest Club at Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Law at IIT Kharagpur, I would like to thank our guest speaker, Ms. Shalini ma'am, who honored this webinar with his great insights on basics of IP valuation and monetization. Once again, ma'am, I would like to thank for taking out precious time from busy schedule and enlightening us with the great knowledge. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are looking forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
ma'am. It was my pleasure. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Happy weekend.
You too.